What is the concrete outcomes of the face-to-face summit between President Xi Jinping and President Joe Biden? To what extent will they stop the deterioration in bilateral relations? The summit between Xi Jinping and Joe Biden in Indonesia produced more concrete outcomes than some had anticipated. This is how the Chinese State Councilor and Foreign Minister Wang Yi summed up the significance of the summit. The summit was an in-depth exchange. They articulated each other's intentions. It drew the red lines. It helped prevent conflicts. It pointed the future direction. And it discussed areas of cooperation. Yes, there is no joint communique or joint statement, but the statement from each side, if you read them carefully, indicate a willingness on both sides to put a floor on the relations to stop the deterioration. The two sides reiterated that they do not want a new Cold War. They do not want competition to veer into conflicts. This is not new, we've heard that. What's new is that the two sides agreed on a framework to stabilize their relations. In Joe Biden's words, the U.S. will develop principles to manage conflicts with China, and he has asked the cabinet secretaries to have meetings with their Chinese counterparts to, quote-unquote, resolve the details of every issue that was raised, a point echoed by the Chinese side, who says there will be working-level teams who will be following up on the consensus reached to, quote-unquote, bring China-U.S. relations back on the track of stable development. Another positive sign. The White House announced that Antony Blinken, the U.S. Secretary of State, will travel to China at some point after the meeting, and Beijing says it would welcome the visit. It is a recognition of urgency to bring this relationship back on track. The two sides also agreed to work together on climate, public health, agriculture, food security, and people-to-people exchange. Diplomatic and financial teams and joint working groups will be in consultations to nail down the details. The length of the meeting matters. The summit lasted over 3 hours, and as someone who has covered 6 China-U.S. summits previously, I can tell you that this is a recent record, because the two leaders talked through simultaneous translators this time around, which doubles the time for actual dialogue and that of alternate translation. Here's the thing. There are causes for cautious optimism in improving relations in the short and even the medium run, but long-term structural issues facing both countries persist. With the conclusion of the 20th National Party Congress and better-than-expected performance of the Democrats in U.S. midterm elections, there are more time and potentially political resources, too, to deal with foreign policy issues, and chief among them, China-U.S. relations. But a summit cannot resolve all the structural issues facing the two sides. I mean, Washington's China containment strategy, though the U.S. stopped short of calling it such, is still there. The Quad, the AUKUS, the IPEF are still there. China is still defined as America's main national security threat, as is enshrined in Washington's 2 national security documents. And Washington must stop promising one thing and doing another. I mean, how can Washington claim that it does not want a tech Cold War with China when it blocks exports of chips to China? America's narrative is that it stops the Chinese military from using high-end chips, but even a middle school student understands the dual-use nature of chips, which are in every part of our lives these days, from smartphones, LED bulbs, rice cookers, to Medicare devices. And Washington also needs to stop its double dealing on the question of Taiwan. If you read the Chinese statement from the summit, you could see an exclamation mark from a political statement. And that was when Beijing talked about the emotional importance of Taiwan to the people of China and to the Chinese mainland, characterizing the issue as the first red line and, quote-unquote, the very core of China's core interests.